an old reel received by mistake. It contains the raw or unedited footage of the crew of Apollo 11, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin Jr. and Neil Armstrong, staging part of their mission for nearly an hour in living color, with exceptionally clear behind-the-scenes audio of conversations discussing the techniques used to achieve a disingenuous picture depicting the Earth at a distance, in order to falsely demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. It cannot be misconstrued that this staging was done for some other reason prior to the mission, for the reel itself is slated and dated July 18th, 19th and 20th, 1969, the very days of the mission when they were said to be approaching and achieving lunar orbit. Here they remove part of the crescent insert. Finally, the iris is opened up and you can see the real location of the camera and the very bright and near Earth out the window. Here is the slate for the 19th of July, and the same shot of trickery on the 19th of July, and then the 20th, and the same misleading shot on the 20th. Later that evening, they were said to be walking on the moon. How can this be when they were in Earth orbit only 9 hours earlier, and the moon is some 3 days' journey away?
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and we didn't go there, and because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen, so in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past that we wanted to keep it going.
Mr. Armstrong, Bart Sibrel, ABC Digital. Wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon? You have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
Please
I have the tape.
It'd be fine.
Why don't you swear to... Why not? Why won't you do it?
The Earth supposedly 23.4 degrees on its axis. And that leaves you, of course, the occultic number, again, 66.6 degrees off. Well, Earth is supposedly orbiting around the Sun at 66,600 miles an hour.
Christian Fred Kalanick was National Director of NASA during the moon flights when lots of mind control programming was going on. And it was being done by both the Masonic Lodges and NASA. Kalanick was not only director of NASA, but the Secretary General of the Scottish Rite 33 Degrees of Freemasonry. I find this to be one of the biggest differences between globe believers and flat earth believers. Those who cannot accept that there might be powerful generational families who have maneuvered themselves into positions of power and are influencing the course of history throughout countless forms of manipulation, one of which is psychological. Most people are unaware of how powerful the establishment is. As long as they don't question their reality, they will never appreciate how limited their freedom of thought truly is.
I am Werner von Braun. This motion picture was produced to enable you to experience more personally and vividly the most dramatic events of the Apollo 11 story. The pictures and sounds are real, recorded in real time, where the action really was. So, come with us. We are going to the moon.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition sequence start.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
I think it means that the job of landing something on the moon where there's no atmosphere and using a rocket to slow it up and having the equipment still work is a very difficult job.
We've been brought in here by Stanley Kubrick to more or less ensure the scientific integrity of the film, to make sure that it's very, very close in reality, but still we want to make certain that it has a base of reality.
Before the end of the 60s, we will see a man on the moon, an American, and we're very proud that our country continues to produce these young men who go so far and carry with them so much.
To put people on the moon and with enough fuel to enable them to return safely home to Earth requires a still larger and more powerful rocket, however.
It's going to take some time, and I think we have to recognize it. They secured these large boosters, which have led to their being first in Sputnik and led to their first putting their man in space. We are, I hope, going to be able to carry out our efforts with due regard to the problem of the life of the man involved this year. But we are behind.
However, let us imagine for a moment that the many problems have been solved. We are ready to begin our first voyage to the moon.
It is quite possible that an aggressor nation that dominates space will then dominate the world.
We're in the final assembly building of the LEM. Stanley Kubrick and I have set ourselves several objectives. We hope to convey to the public the wonder and beauty and promise of the new age of exploration which is opening up before the human race.
Arthur, here we are on the LEM ship, and one can almost imagine we're on our way to the moon, or we've arrived at the moon, as a matter of fact.
Can you believe it? Can you realize that that you and I, that all of us, have actually begun the exploration of another world? We have taken the first historic step into our solar system.
Take 1.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Take 2.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We, the crew of Apollo 11, are privileged to represent the United States in our first attempt to take man to another heavenly body.
Man walks on the moon. Man walks on the moon.
The first man from Earth walked on the surface of the moon this morning, and the suspense here in London is unbelievable.
Hello, Apollo 11, Houston. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming. I'm going to step off the LEM now. Neil and Buzz, the President of the United States is in his office now and would like to say a few words to you. Over. That would be an honor. Go ahead, Mr. President. This is Houston out.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House. And this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made in the whole history of man. All the people on this earth are truly one. One in their pride in what you have done. And one in our prayers that you will return safely to earth.
presented by NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
In the movie, every time that Stanley deviated from the Stephen King novel, he deviated into those exact questions. You know, what was it like to make a deal with the U.S. government? What was it like to accidentally tell someone what you were doing and to watch them possibly have to suffer the consequences of your lack of integrity? What was it like to lie to your wife and tell her that you were doing one thing when you were doing another? What was it like when your wife found out what you were really doing? These are the questions that I had long before I'd seen The Shining again after maybe an 8 or 9 year absence. And I wasn't sure I was right for the first hour. I wasn't sure that I had actually, I wasn't sure if I was blurring the line between what I wanted to see and what I was seeing. And then at about 58 minutes in the film is the famous scene where Danny's playing with his trucks and he stands up and he's wearing the Apollo 11 sweater with a rocket taking off. Then I knew I had nabbed it. And then I started watching the film with an intensity that I don't think I've ever watched a movie before. And every line began ringing true. Wendy, that is just so typical of you. Don't you know I have obligations to my employers? Do you have any idea what a contract is? Do you know what an agreement is? Jack Nicholson's whole tirade against his wife, that's Stanley. That's Stanley telling his wife that, after she discovered what he was doing, which was the Apollo footage. No, that's actually not true. If you call the Mount Hood Resort and you ask for room 217, you will find there is no such room. So that's just not true. That statement's not true. And so Stanley was lying. It's not the reason that he changed the room number from 217 to 237. The reason that he changed it from 217 to 237 was because the room 237 in the film represents the moon landing stage where he worked. And the moon, the standard science textbooks said, and they still say, but now with lasers we've gotten a little better reading, but is that the mean distance of the moon from the Earth is exactly 237,000 miles. So he changed that so that you would understand that this was the moon room. So Danny stands up, he's got the Apollo 11 sweater on, he begins walking down the hallway towards room 237, and there's a key in the lock, and on the key is the words room and then the word NO, which is an old acronym for number, so room number 237, except that the only capital letters on the key are ROOM and then the N from the acronym NO. And if there's only 2 words that you can come up with that have those letters in them, and that's moon and room. And so on the key, the tag, it says moon room. And that is the moon room. This is where everything happens, and none of it's real. And it all has to be lied about. And you can't let anyone know what's really going on in room 237. And there's many, many other deviations from the book to the movie.
It isn't real.